Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel and or podcast wherever you may be listening or watching from. This is Vocal Arts. I just got off the horn with Eric Whitacre, the phenomenal Grammy Award winning choral composer who actually identifies very differently as a musician than I ever would have thought possible. Believe it or not, we got into talking about electronics and dubstep and film scores and everything, and it was no joke one of the most exciting, alive, fun conversations I've had in a long time, and not just for the channel. Eric and I really connected, and it was such a joy to speak with him. And I just didn't realize how much we really had in common, both with our musical experience and with our philosophies on music and life itself. I mean, truly. And he says this at the end of the conversation. I think it's the start of a long, beautiful friendship between us. So, guys, I mean, such a joy. I mean, this Eric Whitacre was, a god to us in undergrad, singing all his music in chamber choir. And what a wonderful guy, and just an amazing conversation. Such an honor to speak with him. And I mean, guys, settle in. You're really going to love this one. So please put your hands together for Eric Whitacre. Everybody, wherever you are watching or listening from, today I am here with the fabulous Eric Whitacre. And I'm going to, yes. And I'm going to pass the baton over to him and let him introduce himself really quick and say what he's up to and what he does for a living.
Thanks, Peter. So I'm a composer and a conductor. I suppose I'm a classical composer and conductor. I write for choirs, mostly orchestras, concert bands. And I travel around conducting mostly my works, guest conducting choirs, orchestras, bands all over the world. I live here in Los Angeles. It's not at all the way I thought this would play out. When I was a teenager, I thought I was going to be a pop musician. I thought I was going to be the fifth member of Depeche Mode. That's what I even write in my my little tags on my social media. Is fifth member of Depeche Mode pending. I'm just waiting for the answer for them. But I discovered choral music in college. I got asked to sing, and the very first piece I sang was the Requiem by Mozart. Oh. And it just utterly changed my life. And then I started writing for choir, and so now I guess I'm a classical composer.
Amazing. We'll get into all of that. Yeah, though, I mean, one of my first questions was what your household was like growing up. Did you grow up being exposed to choral music, and what kinds of music did you listen to, and who were kind of your musical heroes as you were, in childhood and then going into, middle school and high school?
So no one in my family was a musician at all. I was really the black sheep. I don't know if that's how it was for you too. Did you grow up with a family of musicians?
My mom's side is musical. My dad's side is not whatsoever.
That's interesting. Yeah, so no one in my family was, but we had a piano that was an heirloom from my great grandmother, who was a musician, and that part of her family was. So my earliest memories was just walking by that piano and then plunking out tunes, and just from listening by ear. And I think looking back, so I had no exposure to choral music, to singing. I heard choir in high school, but they were madrigal groups. They dressed like Henry VIII, and there's just no way I was going to be a part of any of that. And so when I really think about the two things that awakened me, one was film music. I remember I saw Star Wars in the theaters in 1977. I was 7 years old, and that John Williams orchestral approach is sort of the sound of my childhood. That plus then when I was 12, 13 years old, I discovered computer music. First, I discovered computers. I had a Commodore 64. Well, I didn't have it. My school had it. And so we would go and we had this little computer club and we would program on it. And then that led me to computer music, which led me to Jean-Michel Jarre and Kraftwerk and Tangerine Dream, all these early synth groups, which led me to Depeche Mode, led me to Pet Shop Boys, led me to Duran Duran, all the 80s pop stuff. So I'd say that those were my two biggest influences growing up.
So electronic music was a big part of your development.
So big. I mean, I wish you could see what I'm surrounded by here, because maybe we can talk about it later. I'm getting ready to kind of go back to my roots and write a piece for choir and strings and lots of electronics. And so I've like brought this all back now. And I still, even after doing this for 35 years, classical music, I still think of myself as an electronic artist first. And so I spend every waking hour from the ages of 14 to 18 in my bedroom, playing synths and drum machines and making pop songs and film scores without films, basically.
Wow, we have much more in common than I realized. I knew we had some things in common, but electronic music is a huge part of my
Really?
inspiration as an oh yeah. I went to University of Miami for vocal performance, still singing opera. Um, but when I was in Miami, I found electronic music and went to festivals and stuff like that and started producing all my own stuff. And I mean, when I have extra free time, I am producing. I like heavy stuff. I'll produce like dubstep and crazy kinds of music.
I
But
also I love dubstep. I love I love the crunchier, more dissonant. I mean,
yes,
we could
oh
spend this
my,
whole time talking about electronica, man. I had no idea. Forgive me for not knowing this part of your career.
forgive me as well. No, this is so fascinating.
No, it's to me. I mean, I'm sure I'm going to say everything that you think and feel like is a philosophy, but there's something so magical about these machines that that I think until you've actually played them, you don't realize that you're not making them make the sound as much as you're dancing with them, right? That they've got their own internal. So I just had the other day, somebody said it so beautifully. They said that electronic music are more like a river and they're going downstream one way or the other. And your job is to kind of guide the river, but you're not making the water go downstream. The voltage is already in the system. And so I just love the tactile feeling of them and the philosophy behind electronic music.
That is so fascinating. So you work a lot with analog instruments.
Well, this is what's so funny. So this piece that I'm in the midst of writing right now, the only like I always love an elevator pitch before I start to write a pitch, like something like an idea. Here's a one sentence description of what this thing will be, even if it's not what it turns out to be, but just for myself, like, okay, here's the world that I want to try to build. And so what I said is I want to build Thomas Tallis meets Blade Runner. So that's where it started, right? Like, so it's just this delicate gossamer ancient choral music plus Vangelis, and those 1981 synths. And so the first thing I did was I went back and started looking at, okay, can I literally get my hands on all these old synths? And like that Casio CS80 that he uses, that classic Blade Runner sound, they're like $75,000 now. An actual original one, they're finished properties. So that's obviously not going to happen. So, but in my exploration, then I realized now there's this whole world of modular synthesis and these weird machines that are mostly analog. And I don't know why that is. I'm still using some digital things, but I just keep falling back into real analog instruments where you're just controlling voltage and using filters and oscillators, and especially tactile music instruments. Do you know what I mean? You can get your hands on it. I just can't stand screens anymore. I want to feel it in my hands.
Yeah, I've always wanted to get more into analog. I had a few analog synths back in undergrad when I was really producing a lot of stuff, but for the most part, mine has been screen interface. Which it's much better to be able to touch and move things and like experience the music that way. It's very different adjusting a knob. And like I use Native Instruments Massive a lot. Just one of these great synth designers, especially for dubstep music. And it's still very cool to go in and interact and adjust this and adjust that, but it's so different to feel it like tactile, like you said.
Totally. Well, what I love about Native Instruments is they've actually kind of tried to bridge that gap, right? So they've got they're super MIDI controllable, or they even got their own player so that you're in Massive, but you're still dialing the stuff,
Yeah.
Yeah, I also love Massive. That instrument is just, it's crazy powerful. And then the challenge is like you're saying that when you're on the screen and you're in the box, then you can take it with you anywhere. And even better, it's replicable, right? So like, especially if you're doing live gigs, that you can just take your laptop and maybe a couple controllers or whatever your rig is, and then you're going to open it and it's always going to be the same. And I'm laughing at myself now because I'm using this one instrument called the Lyra 8, which is Maybe you can go look it up later and just see. I wish I could show you a picture, but it really looks like it looks like an instrument that's taken from a Soyuz spacecraft from 1956. And the way you play it is each voice, there's 8 voices, has these 2 metal discs, and you have to actually put your finger on both of them and complete the circuit. The voltage is traveling through your body to make it. Okay, now all of this is so beautiful, cool, but this thing is so fussy. Like if I come back out here in the morning and the temperatures drop 5 degrees in the room, then suddenly this thing is wildly out of tune. And so you have to like gently edge it back into tune, and you have to keep. And so I keep thinking, how am I supposed to perform live with this beat?
Yeah,
you know
yeah,
I mean?
yeah, yeah.
So I totally get. Yeah, I get the necessity for having things in the box, because otherwise you just can't replicate it.
This is such an interesting tangent. I never in a million years thought we would be going on. And I'm absolutely here for it. I have to share, I mean, something I'm working on now that I started about a year and a half ago is these kind of dubstep bass singer, heavy multi-track vocal, like reimaginings of songs. So for example, I don't know if you've seen the show Arcane, but it has some of the most amazing music written for score.
Yeah, who is the composer? Do you know who does
his name is Alex Seaver, and I'm actually talking to him in a couple weeks.
Are you really? Wow. Yeah, yes. Tell him. Yeah, well, obviously you'll tell him, but yeah, it's I'm a massive fan.
I will tell him that Eric Whitacre himself is a fan as well. And so what I've been doing is taking these songs, retracking all the vocals with, heavily multi-track vocals, especially with like a bass voice lead, because that's what I do. And you don't hear very much of them in any genre outside classical, and occasionally country, and putting like a heavy dubstep spin on all these songs. And it is like absolutely where my passion is. Like when I have free time, I am just in those projects recording and editing. And it's a blast. And it has like re-sparked, like you're talking about, 30 years ago, getting back into that. For me, it's the same way. Like it reinvigorates that love and joy for electronic music that, I started, I guess, probably 12, 15 years ago for me at this point. Just amazing stuff.
I can't wait to go and listen to all this. Are you also writing original songs?
I have written a lot of original, purely electronic. This new venture for now is just covers.
Yeah, and I imagine it's exploding on TikTok and Instagram. And
well, the thing is, I haven't shared hardly any of it yet. I've only shared one song, which if you go to my YouTube channel homepage, it is the featured song there. And I did a bunch of crowdfunding and shot a very epic professional music video for it and everything. But I have like 6 or 7 more cooking right now.
Oh, that is amazing. Okay, yeah. So first, yeah, like I said, I can't wait to hear this. And second, the thing that you said about like feeling that joy, that's what I have now felt going back to the electronics. And I don't know if classical music can be, it's so beautiful, it's so elegant, it's so elevated, and it's also so stuffy and exacting. It makes me crazy sometimes. And part of my process as a composer now is I rarely even sit at the piano. Like I generally now have a pretty good idea of what things will sound like on the page. So I use pencil and paper. And, I just sit quietly in a room, and then I write it out, and I think about it, and I draw it out. And then it gets engraved professionally. So it gets turned into, what looks like sheet music. Somebody else does that for me. And then that gets sent over to the group, and they rehearse it. And then I show up sometimes months later, and I hear it for the first time. And what's gone is the reason I got into music in the first place, which was this idea that you could push into these electronics and immediately have this sound that's like actually moving your shirt. You know what I mean? Like it's in your body. You're actually being, I think I'm being healed by it, by the sounds that are coming back, or I'm working through things emotionally in real time. And I miss that so much. And so I feel exactly the way you do, which is like, I feel alive again. I feel it reminds me of how I used to feel when I was making music.
Yeah, just piggybacking off that and sheet music. I mean, so I used to be in an a cappella group in undergrad and did chamber choir and loved it. Like I love all those things. And I'm currently in a group of 4 bass singers called the Bass Gang. And we started out as purely a cappella, and now we've moved into usually just including like drums, but it's heavily multi-tracked. We collaborate from all over the world.
Wow.
It's a cool ensemble. But I used to write very formal arrangements. All of us did, where you sit down, you write it out, and then you put it, and then you track from there. And now we just go into the booth and record, and you can record what you're feeling, and you can sing a phrase and then immediately be like, I don't like that. I'm going to change the way I inflect this and that, instead of writing it all on paper and then just kind of trusting what you wrote without getting that real-time feedback.
Oh, I
And
love
it's
that, man.
and it's been a game changer for the arrangements. They're so much more interesting and they breathe so much more now because they've been made in real time with this input going back and forth between you and the recording software, and you can send these parts out to the other guys to record. That's how we do it. We all make a demo, all the parts we record ourselves, whoever's arranging, and then we send it out to the other guys to record their parts, and they send it back. So they get to hear exactly how you wanted something done.
Exactly. Yeah, not a here's a blueprint, but here's the track you literally will be performing with.
Yes. And then, of course, then it becomes a collaboration between you and the other artists. Like maybe they want to do something different with this phrase, but they get the ideas are alive, you
Oh,
know?
love this. I love this so much. I mean, it's funny because writing for sheet music, and you know this now from having done this with the arrangements, it's kind of an abstraction. And I have very specific faces in my mind when I'm writing that, like I'm writing for this group of altos. I can see them in my mind. So it's not just alto in a general way, but at the same time, I find that I tend to compose music on paper that is uh, durable, that can withstand lots of different interpretations. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So
Yes.
it unfolds and blossoms in a way with a choir of 200, with a choir of 10, with a choir that's professionals, with a choir that's amateur. Like there's a way of writing a blueprint so that it can withstand that. And the idea that you go back and say, no, this is exactly what this is, like making a pop album, right? Or where it's just, you don't go in and you're like, well, okay, I've got this arrangement. Now let's play each of the tracks. You come in and you say, what are we feeling? Does that work with that? No, throw that thing away. Try this. Oh, that's the juice. Throw everything else away. Take that, build that out.
Yeah.
It becomes more alive. And then I think what happens is when you listen to the recording of that, it's authentic. It hits you in the gut, as opposed to what we do in the classical world, which is you make the thing, it gets recorded in kind of a static way. Then you listen back to a performance of it designed for a concert hall, not designed for
Yeah.
here in your ears. And there's always a distance, I find, in
Yeah.
the experience of listening to the recorded music.
Definitely. Definitely. Just a touch on your arrangements, because I mean that is something I thought was always so brilliant about what you wrote. Is I mean I actually I took a summer and just wrote a bunch of choral music because I just
Really?
had it. I just had it in me. It was back in like 2017, and I just took a summer. I wrote 10 choral pieces, and I got to say, it was pretty much all inspired by your style of composition. The the harmonies and the way you put dissonance in there, that and creating dissonance in a beautiful way, and other times in a crunchy way that makes you uncomfortable. Like your use of dissonance is like absolute shining light of the choral world, in my opinion.
Thank you,
And
man.
something I took to heart and have taken from your compositions is, like you said, is being able to write for a group that's 10 people, professional or amateur, to these 100,000 person virtual choir settings. If you're writing super rangy, extremely difficult to perform pieces from like a vocal standpoint, you put a B flat one at the end, it's like
Yeah.
there just aren't that many people that can sing that piece.
Right.
And it separates, and it makes it so that amazing music can't go as far as it can, right? So there's this balance you have to strike between doing things that are interesting and complicated, but also making it in a way that a lot of people can appreciate it and perform it and enjoy it. And I think you've really straddled that line perfectly.
Thank you, man. That means so much to me. Yeah, it's a kind of, there's a pragmatism to it, right? That as you're writing, then I find it in a way liberating in terms of composition, because I I have 1,000 ideas every day, and I'm always thinking, even if I don't have the idea tomorrow, I'm going to have a better idea, and tomorrow I'll be a better composer. Tomorrow I'll be 1 millimeter closer to Stravinsky or Bach. I'll never even get
Of
into the
course, though. Of
neighborhood.
course, it's progress every day.
You keep thinking you'll be better, but the truth is actually no. It's like the only way to get better is to make a decision and then go and make a decision and go and make this. And one of the beautiful things about the handcuffs of pragmatism, I find, is that you have to really box yourself in, right? So for instance, like you were saying, you can't do this crazy rangy stuff because most people can't do that. So then you have to really start to think, okay, I can only use this thing here, which actually from a compositional point of view is liberating, right? Because then it now you've only got 4 colors on your palette. You can't just do whatever. And so that part I love that it forces me to be creative with the small amounts of material that I have. And I think that's partly where I landed on my approach to writing those dissonant chords that you talk about, which is that I found for myself early on that I didn't have the ear or the ability to just leap into the center of some crazy cluster chord. If I had to sing the sharp 4 of something in like this, I just couldn't do it. I couldn't hear it. But if I was singing a note with someone else, and then all I had to do was just hold on to my note for dear life, and somebody else moved a half step down, and then suddenly we're in the middle of this, that I could do. That even I could pull that off. I mean, I'm not a great singer, and so I sort of developed this technique then of finding really complex, shimmery harmonies that most people could do. And I think that's part of the reason that became my signature sound, is because then lots of people try it, as opposed to pieces where it's just like, I think a conductor might look at it and say, we can't do this. This is, you know what I mean? There's no way we're going to sing a 10-part chord.
Yeah, absolutely. No, yeah, totally. Everything you just said, 100%. It's complex. The sounds are complex sounding, but you have made them performable.
Yeah, which is thank you. I feel like sometimes I get closer than other times. Sometimes what I think is going to be very performable, like, oh yeah, this will be fine. And then I get it up in front of a good choir or something to realize, oh hell, this is just badly written. I always have this thing for myself. I learned it with orchestras first, but now I use it with pro choirs too, which is that if I'm in front of a really good orchestra and I've written something new for them, we read through it the first time, and generally the first time everybody's just like, what is happening, right? All they have is their part. They're just holding on for dear life. Okay, I guess we do this, they're going to do that. The second time, then everybody has a general idea. Okay, this is what we're trying to make. Yep, we feel it. By the third time, if it doesn't matter what the piece is, if the orchestra is still struggling by the third time through, it's your problem, not their problem. Like you've really written there's refining to be done, but I think even really complex, difficult pieces, an orchestra or a very good professional choir, by the third time through, they're going to be able to give you a pretty good idea of what's on the page.
Yeah.
It's a very humbling moment for a composer when you're like, oh no, no. I really thought that would work, and that doesn't work.
Yeah, I guess you have to have a sense of humility, I guess, in those cases.
Yeah, I'll tell you the one thing that I learned. It took me a long time to learn this, because I'd watched conductors, both orchestral and choral, who it's not that they were tyrants, but they approached from a place of leadership that was, I am the ultimate authority on the stage here. And I don't know if I was ever that arrogant, but I definitely never let my guard down to say something like, oh boy, this doesn't work, or I don't know what I'm doing in this place. And over the years, I've realized actually saying that out loud and getting the group to help you make this thing, especially the strings, there's a million different ways of approaching the thing. And so I just always defer to them. How would you get this sound? Well, how about we do this? Yes. And then once they're allies, then it's not you leading them anymore. It's everybody sort of like, okay, let's build this mountain. Come on, let's make this thing together. And it's that kind of, it's a kind of humility in service of making something bigger than all of us on the stage.
Yeah. And then that's that live, that breathing life into a piece that we were talking about earlier. Once it becomes a collaboration between you, who's created it, and the people that are actually performing it.
That's it. And that's the best feeling in the world, right? Where you're standing in front of them, but you realize actually they've taken this into their hearts and into their bodies and their souls. And it's like, oh, they own this piece. They're making this happen. And then as a conductor, you're just surfing at that point. Just gently. I always laugh because I'll see YouTube comments over videos where, I'm conducting, and people will say like, this guy has no idea what he's doing, or he's impossible to follow. And I always want to say, I wish you could stand where I'm standing and realize they don't need this right now. This group actually is doing all of that on their own. And so, in fact, there's a kind of gentle dance that I'm doing with them, just like the electronics, right?
I was just going to say that.
It's the same thing. It's maybe that's my 35-year quest is like, is to let go control and dance with the musicians in front of you, whether they're electronic or human.
Yeah, it is so different when whoever you're working with, they're no longer just, I'm paid this much to be here to play the notes. It's like they want it to be something special. Like you said, they've taken it into their hearts and souls, and it completely changes the piece.
Yeah,
for the better, I would say, probably every time.
No question with the music. And then I think actually, if you get it right in terms of the music and the subject of the music, right? In say if you're writing choral music, the poetry, and for opera, like the libretto and the story, if you get all of that right, it actually transforms the performers. They're different people when they finish that performance than when they started. Yeah. And if you've got that happening, then the audience is, then you'll truly take them from this side of the river to the other side of the river. You have this communal experience where everybody's being transformed and no one's actually in charge. Do you know what I mean? Like we're all riding down the river together at the same time.
It's a team sport.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah.
That's fascinating. I love that connection between guiding the analog voltage, and it'll do it on its own. It's like for the live performers, you have to get them to a certain point, and then they become that stream. They don't just start there.
Yes, that's exactly it. And then that's an interesting thing, because with analog machines, it's very clear what the knobs and faders and buttons are, right? Like, okay, if I do this, I'm not entirely sure what will happen, but I have a general idea. At least I know where the buttons are, right? With human beings, it's a whole other thing, right? Like how to speak, how to act, which metaphors to use when describing something. And what I found in concert music is that the foundation of that language to speak to any group of live musicians is the breath. The way you breathe as a conductor and the way everyone else breathes on stage, regardless of whether you're a violinist or you're a singer, that breath is filled with a very, very specific intention, right? More than just, here's where we breathe at the same time. It's actually filled with it's all of it. It's just these terabytes of emotional information, right? That you're sharing back and forth. And that's this magical thing. And this is what I'm constantly reminding myself when I'm with live musicians is just be the breath.
Absolutely. Yeah. Couldn't agree more. Let's go wind the clock back a little bit. I'd love to hear about how you got started on that debut album, Light and Gold, and your inspirations there. And then that whole process. I mean, it ended up, taking home a Grammy, which is just such an amazing accomplishment. And there's just so much timeless, excellent music on that album. And I would love to hear about how that started.
Thank you, man. Well, I'll tell you what's really funny is it reminds me of, oftentimes they'll say with pop artists, they'll say like their first album is their greatest album. And then the second album, the sophomore slump. And musicians will always say, well, that's because I had 15 years to make the first album and 8 months to make the second album. Do you know what I mean? So by the time I recorded Light and Gold, I recorded it in 2010. some of the pieces on that thing were already 15, 16 years old, right? So they
Wow.
been tested, and there's not a piece on Light and Gold that's one of, I didn't include any of my wipeouts. Do you know what I mean? Like in those 15 years, I wrote all sorts of pieces that were like, oh, that will never see the light of day again. Those are on the album, right? So by the time I'd gotten to this collection of my work, they were kind of all of my, it's the best stuff that I'd made and the most polished stuff. And everything happened very quickly, but I made my first virtual choir in 2010. And because of that, suddenly I got I got a call from Decca, and Decca said, "Oh, would you be interested in making an album?" And then I just taken on a new manager, a woman who I adore. She's my whole life, and she negotiated with Decca. Absolutely, but Eric will need his own professional choir in order to make this album. So that birthed the Eric Whitacre Singers. And then I just handpicked all these singers from I was living in London at the time, from my favorite British choirs. So from Polyphony, from the 16, from the Tallis Scholars, from the Monteverdi Choir, just let's take that soprano, that tenor, this, so make like this all-star choir of my favorite singers. And then the album came out, and it won the Grammy, and which was totally unexpected. And I'll tell you, this is a fun story, which you especially will appreciate. So at the Grammys, you go up and you receive your gong, and then they immediately take you off stage and they take away your gong because it's a fake Grammy. You don't get your actual Grammy with your name on it until about 3 months later. So what they do is they immediately take you off the side of the stage, and they put you in this little teeny holding pen, and they wait for the next person so that you go in pairs, and then they take you through this whole press gauntlet, which takes about 2 hours. And each new press gauntlet, you're with this other person who the only reason you're with them is because they happen to be next to you in your category, right? So they announce best choral performance, or whatever. That's me. Then the person right after me, who is it? It's Skrillex. So Skrillex became my press buddy. So the two of us just wandered around for 2 hours, going from press to press to press, and he would do his thing, I would do my thing. We're carrying these fake Grammys. The whole time I'm saying to him, I'm a big fan, man. I really love you. Thanks, man. Thank you. He's the sweetest guy. You'd never listen to his music and think, soft, gentle person he is, right? Anyway, so that was the big thrill for me of winning that Grammy, was that I just got to spend a couple hours with Skrillex walking around with these fake Grammys.
That is absolutely amazing.
Yeah. It was.
Do you remember what his Grammy was for? That was back to back with yours.
Easily look it up. I think I won in 2011. So whatever album he won, although he may have won a couple of Grammys.
Scary Monsters and Nice Sprites, maybe.
I bet it was. So he may have won a couple. He may have won Electronic Producer, or was they give you an album of the year? I mean, remember at one point,
it was huge. It was because no one had heard that kind of music before. Yeah, I will never forget the moment I heard that song, like a dubstep drop, for the first time. I was at the basement of a house party, and my buddy Ben was on the DJ decks, and he threw on Scary Monsters, and everyone at the party was just like, what is happening right now? It is that like visceral kind of primal response that I feel like only that music can bring on.
What's crazy is, dubstep, I think, even started way back in the late 90s or the early aughts, and it was all in London, right? And it took 10 years for it to get out of the warehouses and for Skrillex to popularize it. But I totally agree. There's something visceral, and it's especially that side chaining effect that they use, where you feel a punch and then everything drops and punch, and it's like you're actually being impacted in your body the same way that
I believe that dubstep producers are some of the most skilled producers on the planet. What they can do with sound and what they can do with the headspace in a mix is like how much sound they can pack in there and still have it be super clean. And it's because of the side chaining. They are constantly, it's so smooth you don't even really notice it, but the whole time it's a wall of sound, yet every element you can hear perfectly.
Exactly. I remember the first time that it was right around that time that I was hearing dubstep, and even more than say 90s house or trance or whatever that early EDM stuff was, even in the aughts. I remember hearing dubstep and thinking, oh, for the first time, people are playing the speakers like instruments. They're not using them as a way to have music that they made come through into your house. They've actually turned these things into the instruments themselves. And now you're in a room with the instrument. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, it's. I think people on the outside who don't know, like you said, the meticulous nature of making those tracks. I mean, and that's just the sound, right? That's just the mixing part. Of the other part is just the endless micro editing.
Oh
And
yeah.
now there's some tools that help with that. But you remember those early days with Skrillex or with BT, where it's like you had to edit every, you know, BT would release these songs with 4,000 edits in it. It's like 3 minutes long, and it's just every one of those glitches is like a hand drawn edit.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember, I think my first song I ever made was about 10 or 11 years ago. And even since then, the software has come a long, long way.
Yeah, and then and now you can hear people who just have the software, right, and are like glitch, glitch, and
Yep.
so yeah, then it'll be curious. I'll be curious to see what happens. How do people then break those machines, right? Like, how do
Yeah.
people those little glitch machines? And then what's the next version of what's coming?
Yeah. We'll see. We'll see. Have you ever been to like a proper dubstep show with the giant speakers and the bass just like flooding your whole system?
The closest I've come was a concert at Coachella that I saw,
Yeah.
where it was outside and it was hot even at night, but it was the loudest thing I've ever heard in my life. Do you know what I mean?
It is
And
an experience.
yeah, it's actually like shaking your body
Yeah.
where yeah, it's actually shaking your teeth. It's that loud. And I had massive like earplugs like this so that I could feel as much in my body as possible without blowing out my ears. Um,
Exactly.
yeah, that's the closest I've come. What I always wanted to do though was hear it inside, like yeah, I had this dream of being in a Berlin sort of like basement warehousey looking thing with that sort of screen tech, where it's just getting the flashy lights and weird projections, and like at some point you're just having an out of body experience because of the sensory overload.
Yes. Would highly recommend. It is 10 out
You've
of
done
10.
this. Well, you've
Oh
actually
yeah, yeah.
played these things now as a producer.
I never played festivals. That was part of my big dream once upon a time, before I kind of shifted back towards opera and all these other musical endeavors. But I very much wanted to be like a festival DJ producer for a long time. But I've been to a number of festivals and countless shows inside with the 150,000 volt speakers, and it is absolutely unreal. I'll never forget. There's this one. I mean, there's so many amazing memories, but there's this one experience, and I was hearing this artist called Excision, who's currently the biggest dubstep artist in the world. And this is before he got really, really famous. This is probably back in 2015. And he came to a little 600-person venue in Charlottesville, Virginia, where I grew up, and brought his whole sound system in that little 600-person theater. And there was this one moment when he started a subwoofer below hearing spectrum, and you could feel it before you could hear anything. You're just like, what is happening in my body? And then eventually it got up to
The
like,
waves were probably 30 feet long. You know what I mean? It's probably
yeah,
like an actual earthquake.
it was you could feel your body started to move and the hair standing up on like your legs before you could hear anything. And then it got up in like 30 hertz and you could just start to hear it.
Oh
It
my
was
God.
it was like, an invisible force, right?
Yeah,
It was just
right.
moving your body. It was absolutely, I'll never forget that moment. That was incredible.
It's inspiring. It's really inspiring. I would think, man, you must have had this thought, but these days there's so many DJs, there's so many producers, and everybody's looking for a way to kind of stand out in a way to take it to the next level, to personalize the experience. I mean, what better way to do that than you up there spinning and producing and singing at the same time with a real voice? I mean, that could be monstrous. It could be really interesting to take people on that journey.
Well,
And
thank you so much. I believe, patting myself on the back, that some of the music I'm making now is very interesting stuff, because on some of the tracks, I do put a little of the operatic singing in there. So it's, but it's very, 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 bass vocals, but then of course, stacked harmonies, the dubstep. Occasionally I'll throw an operatic line in there, or like a, to make, even just maybe to add some atmosphere. Like you hear this like bassy vibrato happening, in the distance, and you're like, it just adds kind of like a spooky element to it almost.
Man, I would imagine, like, and some live looping, and so you could loop yourself, and like you said, I'll bet you can sing in all different styles. So you can like activate the operatic style, and then sing in other things, and just have that be like this part of your toolkit would be completely unique. I can't think of a single time I've seen that set of skills all in one place.
Well, I really appreciate that, and the encouragement. It'll keep the fire under me for keeping this music going.
Yeah, man, I'll be in line for your first show.
Amazing.
Yeah,
I'll have to send you some of the stuff I'm working on.
Please do. I'd love to hear all of it.
Awesome, amazing. This is so, again, this is just the I just never envisioned the conversation going this way, and I'm so glad it did.
I'll tell you what I find interesting. I don't know if you've experienced this, but more and more, I can look back on my life. I'm 50, almost 54 now. So I can look back now with a little bit of perspective, and I can say, actually, it's this odd thing where you start to do a thing and you have no idea where this is going. But just the simple act of starting the thing opens up these doors and these paths that you never could have imagined, right? Yeah. So even that I don't know when you started it, but you started a YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And you're doing interviews and you're just reaching out to people like, oh, let's try this, let's try this, let's try this. And you just never know what door will be opened, right? Yeah. From the simple act of, I'll try a thing. Let's see where it takes me.
Well, it sounds like this is your mentality too. And you mentioned something earlier about it. I mean, you have to take action to make things happen.
Sadly, it's true. It's the only way. Yeah. I laugh at myself all the time where I'm like, how do I get an orchestral piece played? What do you have to do? Well, you have to write a piece for orchestra. That's actually how this works. You know what I mean? Like, you gotta start there. You gotta and so, yeah, I'm a big believer of that. And so even with the electronic stuff, I've also got like I'm doing a bunch of cassette tape loopy stuff now too. So I find the sounds that I'm in love with on TikTok or on YouTube, and just going down the rabbit hole. And, I really like that. I'll bookmark that. I really like that little clip, that little thing. And then it's just this endless experimentation. So I'll buy an instrument, I bring it home, I try to play with it, try to see if, nope, that's not it. I take it back. I try another thing, just try to, and I think I'm finally getting my palette down, but it's exactly what you were talking about. It's like, okay, there's no path for this. There's no guidebook. I just got to start throwing stones into the water and see what the ripples do. It's just the only way to do this.
Only way. Take massive action. And when's the best time to do it?
Right now. Yeah. Right. And that's the other thing too, yep. It's
it's not going to do itself.
No, but what's funny is all of that is it's so clear to say it that way. And then when you're in the midst of self-doubt and all that emotional frustration and being overwhelmed by the thing that you want to make and not knowing how to make it, it's very easy to get paralyzed, I find.
Absolutely.
And so I know for myself, what I've done is I've hacked my own brain, because I know that I have a lot of times where I've got this cloud of indecision around me and just feel that gravity of it. And then every now and then, I have no idea why, there'll just be a break in the clouds, sunlight. It's like, oh, there's a clear path and there's optimism. I don't know why. It's probably a chemical thing that's happening in my mind. And then I know from experience, the moment there's that optimism, I just start clicking things like, yep, send me this, buy this, do this. We're going to take this. I'll try this. I'll plug this all in and try. And then there's right. And then, okay, we get you like just trying to hold on to those moments, and then having faith. Oh yeah, the clouds are going to part. So when you're in this part, then take that time to just do the heavy lifting.
Yeah. It's also great, I think, to commit to things when you are in that peak state, when you're like, I'm here for it, I'm ready to go. Because if you don't commit to things in that state, you're not going to do it when the cloud cover's there.
That is
some big opportunity comes up and you're like, no, maybe next year. If you're in the peak state, you're like, yeah, baby, let's get it. And then when the clouds are there, you're like, well, I committed to it, so gotta get it done.
My half-baked California theory about that all of is that It's actually the big mind that knows you need to do this thing in order to grow. And your small mind, the mind that's controlling all of this, is afraid and scared and wants to protect its sense of self, and it's not going to do this. And every now and then, the big mind gets a little daylight and then forces you to commit, knowing that, well, now you're screwed, little mind. I can't have the dialogue with you directly because you won't listen to this. So what we're going to do is we're just going to do this months-long workaround to just help polish the roughness of the stone that is you in the middle of this river. That's my California theory about this.
I'm right there with you. Listen, I think we have 8 more hours of conversation left to explore.
Yeah, man.
I would love to have you back on at some point, and we can continue chatting.
I'd love it. I'd also love to. We should just hang out in person sometime. Where are you in Florida still?
I'm in Phoenix.
Oh, you're in Phoenix.
Yeah, so I'm just a few hours from LA.
Yeah. Anytime you come over, please let me know.
I will. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, well, we'll get a long lunch and then just continue the conversation. And in the meantime, please send me anything.
I will. Yeah, this voice plus electronic plus orchestra is like, I'm all about it, and it's so interesting that you're on that path as well, and really interested in that right now.
Yeah, I think it's a final fusing of it, right? There's the so long classical music has tried to hold back the dam of what is actually happening. I think this all the time. Every time I go and see an opera or something, it's like, it's beautiful, and the staging is beautiful, and I love it. But you also have to acknowledge that people now can just fire up Netflix and have the most extraordinary visuals in the history of cinema right there on their little laptop.
Yeah.
So it's not that opera should go away, but opera needs to acknowledge that actually their audience has a very rich and facile and tactile and varied visual language now. That it doesn't have to just be static like this. You can speak in a lot of different visual languages or musical languages to an audience.
Yeah. No, opera, it does need to find a way forward. It's an amazing art form, and the most amazing thing for me, and is how I sell people on it, is the unamplified voices with orchestra.
It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
Like superhuman.
Yep.
Absolutely amazing. So, and that's something that you have to be there for, which is what's so difficult about opera, because you can't capture the size of a voice in recording, no matter what. You just
it's actually the opposite, right? You actually get you compress it down so that it's part of the same little world.
Yes.
It's only when you actually see 70 people in the pit, and then you're like, oh my God, how's that?
Wait a second.
Yeah, there's 3,000 people in this house, and I can hear them clear as a bell.
Yeah.
I totally agree.
So I'm always thinking, trying to figure out because I love opera. I think it's amazing. I think it'll be a tough path to kind of figure out and compete with these amazing things on Netflix that are so readily available.
That's right. So I think what we do is we don't compete. We just acknowledge and then fuse, like what you're doing, where it's like, listen, people listen to classical music and they listen to dubstep. There are very few, young classical musicians now who only listen to classical music. I'll bet if you look at their Spotify playlist, they listen to every genre there is.
Yeah.
So let's stop pretending that this is the only musical art form there is. Smash them all together. Let's just see what happens.
Absolutely. Let me hit you with a few Patreon questions. Before I get you off the horn, what do you got? 3-4 minutes?
I've got 6 minutes, so I'm great, man.
6 minutes. Wonderful. All right. I'm going to read. So some of these are comments / questions, because some people want to, of course, express their admiration. This is from, this first one's from Isaac, who is truly one of my biggest supporters. Wonderful guy, is always, like, every video is like a long comment about what he appreciates. And it's just like, it's everything you could want in a supporter and a fan. So
I like Isaac already.
Shout out to Isaac. He says, wow, this is amazing. Tons of exclamation points. So this is when I'll put a headshot of you up on my Patreon and say, hey, interview with Eric Whitacre, submit questions. Questions here. He says, I remember you doing a reaction to his song Sleep almost 2 years ago. Exactly 1 year and 3 months after you reacted to that piece, I stumbled upon Eric's newest song at that time called All Seems Beautiful to Me. And that song was absolutely beautiful to me. It sounded like a choral song you would hear in an epic film like King of Kings or Ben-Hur. And his question is, he would be curious to know if you got any of your musical inspiration from these epic classics.
Oh my God. So first, Isaac, thank you. And thank you for the passion, for what Peter's doing, for the music. Thank you. The short answer is yes, like 1,000 times yes. I think if I look at music that has influenced me as a person and as a composer, no music is a greater influence on me than film music. And it's funny even that he mentions All Seems Beautiful to me. So I wish I had a piano right here in front of me so that I could play this, but there's this 3-chord motive in the movie Moneyball, the Brad Pitt movie about the Oakland A's, right? Billy Bean.
Great movie. Yeah.
It's a great movie and a beautiful score. And you or Isaac, if you go back and you listen, you'll know this part that I'm talking about. Maybe I'll post it or send you a link so that you can put it on.
Great.
And you can hear those 3 chords. Now, what I remember when I heard it was, I thought, that is so beautiful. There's a thing that I called sacred pop, which everybody does, which is these 4 chords, right? This as always, and they're 4 different chords, but then you could just make them beautiful and lush, and films use them. Hans Zimmer uses them, but this is only a 3-chord thing, and it kind of loops over and over in this unexpected way. And I remember watching that, just imprinting, like, how beautiful is that? So when I set out to write How Beautiful, or All Seems Beautiful to Me, you can actually hear that 3-chord motive over and over and over through the entire first page. It's this chord, then this chord, then this chord, then this chord, then this chord, in these kind of unpredictable ways. And so it was a direct influence. That Moneyball soundtrack was a direct influence on the writing of that piece.
Awesome. Fantastic. Okay. This is actually from my mom, who submitted a question.
Really?
So shout out to my mom. Amazing that you get to speak with him. From which composers, either classical or not, do you find inspiration? She says she would love for you to write a piece for Yo-Yo Ma. She was actually she was a cellist, and so she's been to a number of Yo-Yo Ma concerts, and Yo-Yo Ma, of course, is like her god.
Yeah, you said your mom's side was, what is your mom's name?
Virginia Barber.
Virginia. Well, hello, Virginia. I would also like to write for Yo-Yo Ma. I wrote this hour-long piece called Sacred Veil recently. It's for choir and piano and cello. And I love writing for cello. I find it the instrument that's most like the human voice, even where the violin is, right? It's got the same basic register and the warmth and the singability. When I think of composers, so besides film composers, I think my desert island classical composer, well, there would be 2 if I could take 2. One would be Debussy, who I just find
amazing,
endlessly beautiful and inventive and colorful and melancholy. And the other one would be Samuel Barber, who is a legend, but I think one of the great unsung heroes of classical music. I think that some of the music he wrote is amongst the most beautiful music I know, starting with a piece called Knoxville Summer of 1915 for soprano.
Yes, stunning piece. I do. Yeah.
Perfect. For me, it's the perfect piece of music. And there's this, like, the second movement of the violin concerto, which is it's music to die to. It's so beautiful.
Amazing. Well, I'll tell my mom that you'll get to work on collaborating with Yo-Yo Ma on something.
yeah. Tell her I'll invite her to the first rehearsal when it happens.
Yeah, you got it. This is from Melinda Hancock. We've kind of already covered this, but we could just recap. What inspiration or composer influence do you use to put together your choral pieces? So are there certain composers that you really like, their soundscapes or their atmospheres that you are inspired by?
The single composer, and for people who really know choral music, this, I don't think this will come as much of a surprise, is a composer named Arvo Pärt. And Arvo, I remember distinctly hearing Arvo Pärt for the first time. My best friend, Charles Anthony Silvestri, this poet that he wrote Sleep. He wrote the lyrics to Sleep. Oh. He gave me this disc of the Passion, the St. John Passion by Arvo Pärt, Passio. And it was the first time I had ever heard dissonances that didn't resolve, where they come to, there's that minor second and it's just, we're there. And that's the end of the chord. And I get chills even thinking about the moment that I first realized that was a possibility. And I think I've spent 35 years chasing that dragon. This idea that you can, I always think of it as a bruise that hurts when you press it, but it also feels good at the same time.
Yeah.
You can just land on this chord and just let it ache and not go away from it. It was such, it still influences me to this day. Even this piece I'm writing right now, I think to myself, wow, I just hear Arvo Pärt's fingerprints all over this.
Amazing. Now I have one last super quick one, and this is from Melody, and she asks, what's your favorite key to compose in?
Ooh, my gosh. It's an interesting question. I think like if I had to just choose a key, I probably would choose D flat major or B flat minor. It's relative, major and minor. First, for singers and even for strings, it's just so warm and rich and chocolatey, and it's somehow tunes super well. And it's got my favorite thing about music and frankly life, which is this glimmer of optimism and then this deep river of melancholy at the same time. Like just that's D flat to me.
I always love the low C sharp at the end of Luke's. Always love
Yeah,
singing
right.
that. Always love singing that one in undergrad.
Yeah, you've got the perfect voice for it. Yeah, that's a perfect example of that key, right? Is that when it switches at the end to C sharp major, but basically D flat major.
Yeah.
And then it's got that thing. It's feels like it's glowing. It's warm, but it's also just deeply melancholic and achy. Yeah.
Amazing. Awesome.
What a great life we have, isn't it? Don't you?
It is. And I try to be, I'm actively working to just be grateful every day as much as possible, because you're absolutely right. Eric, this has been such a joy. Wow.
Yeah, for me too, man. It's great to meet you, Peter. And thanks again for reaching out to me. I think this is the start of a beautiful friendship.
I do too, man. Thank you so much. I can't wait to share this with all, especially my friends from undergrad, because we all sang your music together so much in those undergrad choirs. And
I have to tell you, not to interrupt you, but this is one of the more surreal things now about my life, is that I'm having a conversation with you. Like, you're a fully functioning artist and adult, and then you say like, no, all of the like you're.
Thank you.
I feel simpatico with you, and then at the same time, you're like, I can't wait to tell all my friends, because when we were all young, we sang pieces that were already 20 years old. You know what I mean? It's so surreal. Like, oh, that's right. This wheel of time is just turning and turning and turning.
Yeah. It's absolutely stunning. Such a joy, such a pleasure. I'll keep you posted on releases and all that, and we'll of course be in touch about all the other things.
Thank you, Peter. Be well, yeah.
Hey, take care.
Take care, man.